I walked into the private room and saw no menus, just a contract titled Venue Assignment and Release. Mom smiled sweetly, saying we needed to discuss the wedding venue for fairness. I looked around the table and counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They frowned at my silence until I smiled. Funny, I said, because I only brought one person too. If you want to know how my rich father-in-law destroyed my sister's dream wedding. Stay tuned. My name is Colette Sinclair, and I knew the moment I stepped across the threshold of the private dining room at the Onyx in Newport Mesa that I had walked into an execution, not a dinner. The air in the room was stale, recycled, and freezing cold, smelling faintly of expensive leather and lemon polish rather than roasted garlic or wine. I had been told to arrive at 7 in the evening for a family discussion, but the scene before me had nothing to do with family. The round mahogany table in the center of the room was stripped bare. There were no place settings. There were no wine glasses catching the dim recessed lighting. There were no menus. In the center of the table, where a centerpiece of flowers should have been, sat a single, thick stack of legal-sized paper and a heavy black fountain pen. Sitting around the far side of the table, arranged like a panel of judges, were 3 people. My mother, Marlene Sinclair, sat in the middle. She was wearing her armor, a structured cream blazer that cost more than my first car, and her hair was coiffed into that immovable, perfect helmet of blonde that she only wore when she wanted to intimidate a manager or negotiate a divorce settlement. To her right sat my younger sister, Brielle. Brielle looked small, shrinking into her chair, wearing a soft pink cardigan that made her look innocent, almost childlike, despite being 26 years old. She refused to meet my eyes, her gaze fixed on her manicured fingernails. And to my mother's left sat a man I had only met twice before, Wade Mercer. My mother introduced him to people as a legal consultant for the family trust, but everyone knew he was essentially a professional bully in a $3,000 suit. He was the man you hired when you wanted to strong-arm a tenant out of a rental property or silence a disgruntled former housekeeper. I stopped just inside the heavy oak door. The waiter who had escorted me here sensed the tension immediately, bowed his head, and backed out, closing the door with a soft click that sounded final. "Colette, darling, sit down," my mother said. Her voice was too high, too bright. It was the voice she used when she was lying. We ordered some sparkling water. We thought it best to keep clear heads tonight. I did not sit. I stood behind the empty chair across from them, gripping the back of the wood. My knuckles turned white. I looked at the table, then at the stack of papers. "I thought this was a planned dinner," I said, keeping my voice level. "The tasting menu for the reception. You said we needed to finalize the head count for the caterer by Friday." Marlene smiled, a tight stretching of lips that did not reach her eyes. "We will get to that," she said. "But first, there is a small administrative matter we need to clear up. Just a formality, really, to make sure everything is fair." "Fair," I repeated. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. Wade Mercer cleared his throat. He did not smile. He placed a large, manicured hand on the stack of documents and slid them across the polished wood until they rested directly in front of my empty chair. The friction of paper on varnish was the only sound in the room. "Ms. Sinclair," Wade began, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that was practiced and devoid of empathy. "As you know, the Seabriar House estate is a legacy asset of the Sinclair Family Trust. While your mother has generously allowed you to begin preliminary preparations on the grounds, the trust requires a formal assignment of venue rights to ensure liability is managed correctly." I looked down at the cover page. The bold text stared back at me in aggressive, sans-serif font, "Venue Assignment and Release." I read the first paragraph upside down. It was standard legal jargon until I reached the third clause. It stated, in plain English, that the undersigned, Colette Sinclair, hereby voluntarily relinquished all claims, reservations, deposits, and usage rights regarding the property known as Seabriar House for the dates spanning the 2nd and 3rd weeks of September. I looked up. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a slow, heavy thud that echoed in my ears. This is not a liability waiver, I said. This is a cancellation. It is a transfer. Marlene corrected me. She picked up her glass of water, took a delicate sip, and set it down. Look, Colette. We have been looking at the calendar. We have been looking at the logistics. Brielle has been so stressed lately. You know how sensitive she is, and with her engagement happening so fast, and her fiancé's family expecting a certain standard of elegance, I cut her off. Brielle got engaged 3 weeks ago. I have been planning my wedding at Seabriar for 8 months. Brielle finally looked up. Her eyes were wet, glistening with that practiced vulnerability she had perfected since kindergarten. Colette, please, she whispered. You know I have always dreamed of getting married at the house. It is part of my vision board. I have the pictures saved from when we were 12. I stared at her. I felt a coldness spreading through my chest, freezing the anger before it could explode. I have paid for the landscaping. I said, my voice was deadly quiet. I paid for the lighting installation in the Oak Grove. I paid the deposit for the luxury tent rentals because the vendor required a site-specific contract. I transferred $22,000 of my own savings to the renovation contractors last month because Mom said the trust was temporarily illiquid. Marlene waved her hand dismissively, as if $22,000 was pocket change. That was an investment in the family property. Colette, it increases the value of the estate for everyone. You should be proud to contribute to your heritage. I looked back at the document, and the vendors I asked, the catering. The band Wade Mercer answered this time. The assignment clause covers vendor contracts. Essentially, you would be assigning the dates and the vendor relationships to Brielle. She will take over the contracts. And the money I paid, I asked, the non-refundable deposits. We can discuss a reimbursement plan, Marlene said quickly. Over time, once Brielle's wedding is over and the dust settles. But right now, we need to focus on the optics. Brielle has already sent out save the dates. I felt the room tilt slightly. She sent out save the dates I asked. For my date, for my venue. Marlene sighed. The sound of a martyr being forced to deal with a difficult child. It is not your venue. Colette, it belongs to the family. And Brielle, well, she was just so excited. She did not think you would mind switching. You are so resourceful. You and Grant can get married anywhere. You are low maintenance. You have always been the independent one. Brielle needs this. Her fiancé is, well, his family is very particular. We cannot have her getting married in a hotel ballroom. It would look common. I looked at Brielle. She was not crying anymore. She was watching me with a look of expectancy, waiting for me to fold, waiting for me to do what I had done my entire life. Step back, be the bigger person, fix the problem so the golden child could shine. She announced it on social media this morning, Brielle said softly. My friends are already booking flights. If we change it now, I will look ridiculous. So you want me to cancel my wedding, lose my deposits, and hand over a venue I paid to renovate, just so you do not look ridiculous, I asked. Marlene leaned forward. Her face hardened. The sweet mask slipped, revealing the steel beneath. Do not be selfish. Colette, if you do not sign this, you are going to cause a massive rift in this family, and I will remind you, the venue is legally under my control as the executor of the trust. If we have to do this the hard way, I will simply ban you from the premises. I will tell the vendors you were unauthorized to sign contracts on behalf of the property. I will make sure you lose every single cent you put in. Wade Mercer tapped the pen against the table. 2 distinct clicks. It would be much cleaner to sign Ms. Sinclair. We have prepared a non-disclosure agreement as well. It protects everyone's reputation. You walk away. Brielle gets the dates, and the family avoids a scandal. I looked at the 3 of them. A mother who saw me as a resource to be harvested, a sister who saw me as an obstacle to be removed, and a lawyer who saw me as a signature to be extracted. They thought they had trapped me. They thought I was the same Colette who used to apologize for taking up space. They thought I was alone. I took a deep breath. I pulled out the chair and sat down slowly. The leather creaked in the silence. I picked up the pen. Marlene relaxed. Her shoulders dropped 2 inches. I knew you would be reasonable, she said. I turned the pen over in my fingers. It was heavy, expensive, Mont Blanc, probably bought with money from the trust that was supposed to pay for the roof repairs I had covered last winter. I did not uncap it. Instead, I placed it down next to the paper, perfectly parallel to the edge of the table. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "Who is that?" Marlene asked sharply. "We are in a meeting." "Colette, put that away." I ignored her. I placed the phone face down on the table, next to the pen. I looked around the table, meeting each of their gazes in turn. I started to count, not in my head, but out loud. 1, I said, looking at Wade. 2, I said, looking at Brielle. 3, I said, looking at Marlene. Marlene's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" "Stop being dramatic." I leaned back in my chair and crossed my arms. 3 people, I said. "You brought 3 people to ambush me. You thought that was enough. You thought if you outnumbered me, if you brought a suit to scare me and a crying sister to guilt me, I would just roll over. I'm not playing games." "Colette," Marlene hissed, "sign the paper." I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had watched the weather forecast and brought an umbrella while everyone else wore silk. "I am not playing games either." "Mother," I said, "I am just doing the math. You have 3 people. That is a strong offense. But you made a miscalculation." "What miscalculation?" Wade asked. He seemed less bored now. He seemed alert. I tapped the back of my phone case. I sent a text message exactly 30 seconds ago. Just one word. The room was silent. The air conditioner hummed, a low drone that sounded like a hive of bees. And then there was a knock at the door. It was not the hesitant, polite knock of a waiter. It was 3 solid, heavy raps, hard, authoritative, the sound of someone who owns the building, or perhaps owns the block the building sits on. Marlene jumped. Brielle looked at the door, her eyes wide. Wade frowned and started to stand up. "Who is that?" Wade demanded. "This is a private meeting." I did not look at the door. I kept my eyes locked on my mother. "I told you," I said softly. "I only brought one person too." The door handle turned. The heavy oak swung inward with a groan, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees as the figure stepped into the light. He was tall, wearing a charcoal gray suit that made Wade's look like a costume rental. His hair was silver, perfectly groomed, and his eyes were the color of glacial ice. He did not look at me. He did not look at Brielle. He looked straight at Wade Mercer, and then he looked at my mother. He held a briefcase in one hand, not a thin leather folio like Wade's, but a hard-sided case that looked like it could survive a plane crash. Behind him, a woman in a sharp navy pantsuit stepped in. I knew her, Dana Klein, my lawyer, the one I had hired 2 days ago when I found the discrepancy in the vendor invoices. But it was the man who sucked all the air out of the room. Marlene's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked from the man to me, and for the first time in my life, I saw genuine, unadulterated fear in her eyes. "Harrison," she whispered. Harrison Holloway walked to the table. He did not sit. He placed his briefcase on the empty space next to the venue assignment contract. He looked at the paperwork, read the title upside down, and let out a short, dry sound that might have been a laugh if it had any humor in it. "Mrs. Sinclair," Harrison said. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding regarding the definition of ownership." He looked at Wade. "And you must be the legal consultant. I suggest you cap your pen." Harrison turned to me then. His expression softened. "Just a fraction of an inch." He nodded. I looked back at my mother. 4, I said. 5, 6. I smiled again. "Now the sides are even." I said, "Shall we order dinner? Or should we talk about why you are trying to lease a property that has been in foreclosure for 6 months? Marlene's face went white. The color drained out of her so fast she looked like a wax statue. Brielle gasped, a sharp intake of breath that sounded like a sob. Wade Mercer froze, his hand hovering over his file. And I knew, right then, that the wedding was just the beginning. The real war had just started, and I had just brought a nuclear weapon to a knife fight, to understand why I walked into that restaurant with a lawyer and a heart turned to stone. You have to understand the house I grew up in. It was a beautiful house on the edge of a cliff in a town where the ocean mist rusted your car door handles within 6 months. But the property values were high enough that nobody cared. We had a wraparound porch and a lawn that was manicured with scissors. Inside, we had a collection of framed photographs that told the story of a perfect American family. The problem was that I was barely in them, in the Sinclair household. Love was not a renewable resource. It was a finite currency, minted and distributed solely by my mother, Marlene. And like any economy, there were winners and there were losers. My sister, Brielle, was the gold standard. She was born with my mother's exact shade of blue eyes and her terrifying ability to cry on command. Brielle was the child who got the dance lessons, the modeling portfolio at age 6, and the private tutors when her grades slipped. She was the investment. I had an insurance policy. I was darker, quieter, and stubbornly self-sufficient. While Brielle was being driven to pageants, I was in the garage fixing the chain on my own bicycle because I knew asking for help came with a price tag of guilt that I could not afford. My father saw it. He was a quiet man who spent 30 years working in logistics, moving containers from one side of the world to the other. He died 4 years ago in a hydroplaning accident on the interstate, a sudden, violent punctuation mark at the end of a quiet life. But before he died, he sat me down in our kitchen, his hands calloused and warm around a mug of black coffee. "Colette," he had said to me, looking toward the living room where my mother was loudly directing Brielle on how to pose for prom photos, "do not pay for blood with your future. Family is who holds you up, not who holds you down." I did not fully understand him then. I did it now, after he died. The dynamic in the house shifted from difficult to impossible. I moved out 3 weeks after the funeral. I built a life that had nothing to do with the Sinclair image. I got a job as a senior systems analyst for Northwind Harbor Systems. It was unglamorous, back-end work involving data migration and server stability, but it paid 6 figures and allowed me to work remotely from a 1-bedroom apartment that I paid for myself. I drove a 4-year-old sedan. I cooked my own meals. I saved 50% of my paycheck. I did not live for the Instagram moments that Brielle and my mother curated so carefully. My life was small, tidy, and mine. Then I met Grant. Grant Holloway was everything my mother would have wanted on paper. But nothing she understood in reality. He came from old money, the kind that built libraries and university wings, but you would never know it by looking at him. He drove a battered truck, wore flannel shirts that had seen better days, and worked as an environmental architect because he liked soil more than boardrooms. When we got engaged, he did it in his living room, with a ring he had designed himself and a pizza burning in the oven because we were laughing too hard to hear the timer. It was real. It was us. We did not need a big wedding. Grant would have been happy with a courthouse ceremony and a dinner at our favorite taco spot. But then, my mother called. It was a Tuesday evening, about 3 months after our engagement. I remember the weather because it was pouring rain, the kind of storm that rattles the windows. Marlene's voice on the phone was different. It was soft, vulnerable. "Colette," she said, "I have been thinking. Your father, he would have wanted you to have a beautiful day." I stiffened, waiting for the ask, waiting for her to tell me that Brielle needed money for a car repair, or that the roof at the main house was leaking again, but she continued. "The Seabriar house. It has been sitting empty since Aunt Joyce passed. It is part of the trust now. I want you to have it for the wedding." I stopped breathing for a second. Seabriar House was the crown jewel of the Sinclair extended family. It was an estate up in the hills, an old Victorian mansion with sprawling gardens and a view of the harbor that people paid thousands of dollars to photograph. It was prestigious. It was history. For free, I asked, suspicion warring with hope. "It is your birthright." "Colette," she said, sounding hurt that I would even ask. "It is family property. I want to do this for you. I know I have been distracted with Brielle over the years, but I want to make this right. Let this be my gift." I should have hung up. I should have listened to my father's voice echoing in my head. But there is a part of every child, no matter how old or how scarred, that desperately wants to be chosen. I wanted to believe that my mother finally saw me. I wanted to believe that for one day, I could be the daughter who mattered. "Thank you, Mom," I whispered. That was the moment the trap snapped shut, though I would not feel the teeth for months. The planning began with a kind of intoxicating speed. Grant and I drove out to Seabriar House the following weekend. The place was majestic, but it was tiring. The paint was peeling on the north face, the gardens were overgrown with invasive ivy, and the gazebo looked like a strong wind might knock it into the ravine. "It needs some love," Grant said, kicking at a rotten floorboard on the porch. "But the bones are good." Marlene met us there, beaming. She walked us through the property, waving her hands grandly. "Just imagine the ceremony under the old oak tree," she said, "and the reception on the lawn. It will be the event of the season." Then came the first request. "We need to clear out the ivy and reseed the lawn if you want it to look nice for September." Marlene said a week later, "The trust is a little tied up in investments right now. If you could cover the landscaping crew, we can consider it your contribution to the estate." It seemed reasonable. It was my wedding. After all, I wrote a check for $3,500. 2 weeks later, it was the lighting. "The old wiring in the garden is a fire hazard. Colette," my mother told me over coffee, "we cannot have guests tripping in the dark. I have a quote here for upgrading the external electrical system. It is $6,000. I hesitated then. "Mom, that is a capital improvement to the house. Shouldn't the trust pay for that?" she sighed, setting her cup down with a sharp clatter. "I am giving you a venue that would cost $20,000 to rent on the open market. Colette, and you are haggling over wiring. I thought you wanted this place to be safe for your friends." Guilt. It was her favorite weapon. I paid $6,000. It snowballed. I paid for the pressure washing. I paid to have the gazebo stabilized and repainted. I paid the deposit for the luxury portable restrooms because the house plumbing could not handle 100 guests. I paid the florist who required a site-specific contract because the location was technically residential. Every time I asked about a contract, about getting the dates in writing, Marlene waved me off. "Colette, honey, we are family," she would say, laughing as if I were telling a silly joke. "You do not sign contracts with your mother. The dates are yours." I have already told the cousins to mark their calendars. I wanted to believe her. I ignored the knot in my stomach. I focused on the work. I spent my weekends at Seabriar, clearing brush with Grant, painting fences, watching the place transform from a neglected relic into the dream venue she had promised. I was building my stage, brick by expensive brick. Grant was the one who noticed the pattern first. "Why is Brielle always here?" he asked one afternoon in July. We were up on ladders, stringing market lights through the oak branches. Brielle was down on the patio below, walking with a clipboard, pointing at things while a woman I did not recognize took notes. "She is just helping Mom," I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. "She likes events." Grant frowned. "She is not helping. Colette, she is measuring. That woman with her is a wedding planner from the city, not our planner. A different one." I brushed it off. Brielle was always planning imaginary events. It was her hobby. But then the requests for money stopped being about the house and started being about the event flow. Marlene told me I needed to hire a specific valet company because the neighbors were difficult. She insisted I use a specific caterer who had experience with the historic kitchen. I agreed, writing checks for deposits, putting down my credit card for retainers. By August, I had sunk nearly $35,000 into Seabriar House and the vendors associated with it. My savings account, which had taken me 6 years to build, was drained to the distinct uncomfortable level of 4 figures. But the house looked beautiful. The grass was emerald green. The gazebo gleamed white in the summer sun. The electrical system hummed with safe, modern power. Then came the text message that changed everything. It was 3 days ago. I was at my desk, coding a patch for a database migration. When my phone buzzed, it was a notification from our family group chat. But it was not from Mom. It was from Brielle. She had posted a photo. It was a picture of her left hand, manicured and bearing a diamond that looked suspiciously like the one she had pointed out in a magazine 3 years ago. The caption read, "He asked," and I said, "Yes, our forever starts soon, Seabriar wedding dreams come true." I stared at the hashtag, Seabriar wedding. My stomach dropped. I called my mother immediately. She did not pick up. I called Brielle, straight to voicemail. I drove to my mother's house, my heart pounding in my throat. When I got there, she was in the kitchen, arranging flowers. She looked calm, too calm. "Mom," I said, holding up my phone. "Why is Brielle tagging Seabriar for her wedding? She just got engaged an hour ago." Marlene did not turn around. She trimmed the stem of a hydrangea with a sharp snap of her shears. "Oh, Colette, do not be dramatic. She is just excited. We will talk about it later. We need to talk about it now." I said, "My wedding is in 5 weeks. We are having a family dinner on Sunday," Marlene said, finally turning to face me. Her eyes were cool, detached. "At the Onyx? We will sort out the schedule then. Just bring your calendar. We need to make sure everything is fair." That word hung in the air between us. I looked at the woman who had raised me, the woman who had accepted check after check from me to fix up her family estate, and I felt a cold realization settle over me like a shroud. I went home and told Grant. He sat in silence for a long time, his jaw tight. Then he picked up his phone and called his father. I did not sleep that night. I sat up looking at the spreadsheets of expenses, the bank transfers, the emails where my mother had vaguely promised that everything was taken care of. I looked at the total sum at the bottom of the Excel sheet, $35,420, and as the sun rose over the city, casting long shadows across my living room floor, a single, devastating thought crystallized in my mind. I did not know if I was paying for a wedding, or if I had spent my life savings paying to buy the right to be a daughter. The weeks leading up to that dinner at the Onyx were a masterclass in slow suffocation. It did not happen all at once. If Marlene had walked up to me in July and told me to hand over my wedding, I would have laughed in her face. Instead, she chipped away at my ownership of the event, piece by tiny piece, until I was standing on a foundation made entirely of sand. It started with a site visit in early August. The coastal fog was heavy that morning, clinging to the eaves of Seabriar House like wet cotton. The renovations I had funded were complete. The gazebo was pristine, the lawn was a lush carpet of green, and the new electrical system hummed quietly, ready for thousands of fairy lights. I walked the perimeter with my mother. She was in high spirits, carrying a thick binder that she clutched against her chest like a shield. "It looks magnificent, Colette," she said, gesturing to the south lawn. "You really have an eye for potential. The Sinclairs have always been visionaries." I felt a flush of pride. For a moment, it felt like we were partners. Then we reached the solarium, a glass-enclosed wing on the east side of the house. I reached for the handle, but the door was locked. "Why is this locked?" I asked. "I need to measure the floor space for the cocktail hour tables." Marlene did not miss a beat. "Oh, the permit inspector found a small issue with the ventilation. Nothing major. But we have to keep it sealed until the paperwork clears. Just a formality." I frowned. "I paid for the permits." "Mom, the contractor sent me the approval notice last week." She waved a hand, dismissing my concern. "It is a zoning thing. Honey, do not worry your pretty head about it. I am handling it. Speaking of handling things, I need you to sign these." She opened the binder and pulled out 3 sheets of paper. They looked like standard scheduling forms, the kind you would find at a community center. "What are these?" I asked, taking the clipboard. "Just usage logs for the trust," she said, adjusting her silk scarf. "Since you are the first event since Aunt Joyce passed, we need to establish a paper trail for the insurance company. It just confirms the dates you are requesting access to the grounds." I scanned the page. It listed the dates September 14th and 15th. It listed the areas of access grounds, main hall, kitchen, but there was no language about exclusivity. There was no mention of the rental fee I had essentially paid through renovations. "Mom, this is a request for access," I said. "It does not say confirmed reservation." "Colette, Please, she sighed, the warmth vanishing from her voice. Do you really think I am going to double book my own daughter? This is just for the file. If you do not trust me, how can you trust me to walk you down the aisle? That was the hook. She knew exactly where to snag me. I signed the papers. As soon as the ink was dry, she slid the sheets back into her binder and snapped the ring shut. Can I have a copy? I asked. I will scan them and email them to you later. She promised. She never did. The next phase was the vendor bleed. Because Seabriar House was a historic property with difficult access roads and specific noise ordinances, Marlene insisted that I use a very specific list of vendors. You cannot just hire anyone. Colette, she told me over the phone. The caterer needs to know how to work with a vintage stove. The tent company needs to know the wind patterns on the bluff. If you hire cheap outsiders, they will ruin the lawn. So I hired her people. I wrote a check for $4,500 to a lighting company that charged double the market rate because they knew the property. I transferred $8,000 to a catering firm called Salt and Sage because Marlene said they were the only ones who had the keys to the service entrance. I paid $3,200 for luxury restrooms, $2,000 for a specific florist who specialized in local hydrangeas, and $1,500 for a valet service. Every check I wrote felt like I was buying another brick in the wall of my own security. I told myself that quality cost money. I told myself that I was investing in a perfect day. But then Brielle started showing up. It began innocently enough. I would be at the venue meeting with the tent coordinator, and Brielle would wander in, wearing a sundress and a large sun hat, looking like she had just stepped out of a catalog. "Oh, do not mind me," she would say, trailing her hand along the newly painted railing of the gazebo. "I am just soaking up the vibes. It is so romantic here." She would hover while I discussed table layouts. She would listen intently when I talked about the timeline. "So, the ceremony starts at 4 in the afternoon," she asked one day, leaning against a pillar. "Yes," I said, checking my clipboard. 4 sharp. "And the sunset photos are at 6. Yes." "Why?" She shrugged, a small, secretive smile playing on her lips. "Just curious. I want to make sure I'm ready. You know how long it takes me to get ready." A few days later, the concession started. I was at my mother's house for dinner. We were clearing the plates when Marlene cleared her throat. "Colette, we need to talk about the seating chart," she said. I pulled out my phone. I have the draft right here. Grant's family is on the left. Ours is on the right. Marlene shook her head. "That is not going to work. Aunt Linda and the cousins from Delaware need to be in the front row, but the front row is for immediate family." I said, "That is you, Brielle, and Grant's parents. Brielle needs to sit in the second row," Marlene said flatly. I stared at her. "What? She is my sister. She is the maid of honor. She will be more comfortable in the second row." Marlene said, "She has been having anxiety lately. Being in the absolute front might trigger her, and we need to keep the front row clear for the elders. It is a respectable thing." It made no sense, but I was too tired to fight. "Fine," I said. "Second row. And one more thing," Marlene added. "The bridal suite? The master bedroom on the second floor," I asked. "The one with the balcony?" "Yes. We are going to set that up as a quiet room for Brielle." I dropped my fork. It clattered loudly against the china. "Mom, that is where I'm supposed to put on my dress. That is where the photographer is doing the getting ready shots. You can use the guest room down the hall." Marlene said, "It has lovely light. Brielle needs a space where she can retreat if the crowd gets too overwhelming. You know how fragile she has been since her breakup last year. You are the strong one. Colette, you can get dressed anywhere. Do not be selfish." Selfish. The word acted like a leash, snapping me back into line. I told Grant about it that night. He was sitting at our kitchen island, reviewing the budget spreadsheet I had updated with the latest vendor payments. "This is weird." "Colette," he said, looking up, "why is your sister taking the bridal suite? Why is your mother dictating the seating chart for a wedding she is not paying for? She is letting us use the venue." I reminded him, though the words sounded hollow even to me. "That is worth $20,000. Grant shook his head. "You have paid nearly that much in repairs and upgrades. You are not a guest. Colette, You are a tenant who improved the property. You have rights. I just want peace. Grant, I whispered, I just want to get to the day without a war. He held my hand, his thumb rubbing over my knuckles. I know. But peace should not cost you your dignity. 3 days later, the bomb dropped. I was at work when my phone blew up with notifications. I opened Instagram, and there it was. Brielle's hand, the diamond, the caption about forever starting soon. I felt a surge of nausea. Not because she was engaged, though the timing was suspicious, but because of my mother's reaction. Marlene called me 10 minutes later. She was screaming with joy. Did you see? Did you see? She shrieked. Brielle is engaged. Todd finally proposed. Oh, it is a miracle that is great. Mom, I said, trying to muster enthusiasm. But how they broke up 3 months ago. Oh, true love always finds a way, Marlene said dismissively. Listen, we need to celebrate. This changes things. What do you mean? This changes things, I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. The energy. Colette. The family energy. It is a double blessing. She hung up before I could ask what that meant. The uneasy feeling in my gut turned into a full-blown alarm bell. I left work early. I did not call my mother. I did not call Brielle. I drove straight to Seabriar House. I told myself I was going to check on the tent setup measurements. I lied to myself. I was going to check on my reality. I parked my car down the road, behind a hedge of hydrangeas, and walked up the driveway on foot. There were 3 cars in the driveway, my mother's Mercedes, Brielle's convertible, and a white van with the logo, Salt and Sage, catering the vendor I had paid $8,000 to. I walked quietly across the lawn, sticking to the shadows of the oak trees. I could hear voices coming from the patio. I got closer. I could see them now. Marlene was standing by the French doors, holding a glass of champagne. Brielle was next to her, beaming, wearing white, and the owner of the catering company, a man named Elias, who I had met 3 times, was holding a clipboard. So for the main course, Brielle was saying, her voice carrying clearly in the coastal air, I am thinking we switch the salmon to the filet mignon. Todd's family are big meat eaters. Elias nodded. Making a note. We can certainly do that. Ms. Sinclair? But that will increase the per-plate cost by about $12. Marlene waved her hand. That is fine. Just bill it to the account on file. I froze. The account on file. My account, my credit card, and the date Elias asked. Just to confirm, September 14th, Marlene said. Saturday. I felt the blood drain from my face. September 14th was my date, my wedding day. I stepped out from behind the tree. My date, I said loudly. The 3 of them jumped. Marlene spun around, spilling champagne on her blouse. Brielle looked like a deer caught in headlights. Elias looked confused. Colette Marlene gasped. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at work. I ignored her. I walked straight up to Elias. I am the client, I said, my voice shaking with rage. My name is on the contract. My credit card is on the file. Why are you taking menu changes from my sister for my date? Elias looked from me to Marlene. Mrs. Sinclair told me. She told me the event was being rebranded, that it was a family decision. Rebranded? I repeated. Marlene stepped between us. Her face had shifted from shock to that cold, hard mask I knew so well. Elias, give us a moment, please, she commanded. The caterer scurried away toward his van like a rat fleeing a sinking ship. I turned to my mother. You are stealing my wedding, I said. It was not a question. Marlene sighed, adjusting her blazer. Do not be so dramatic. Colette, nobody is stealing anything. We are just optimizing. Brielle's fiancé. His family is very prominent. They need a certain caliber of event. You and Grant. You are simple people. You do not need all this pomp and circumstance. I paid for it, I shouted. I paid for the lights. I paid for the lawn. I paid for the food. And you will be reimbursed, Marlene shouted back. Eventually. But right now, Brielle needs this venue. She needs the win. Colette. Can't you see that? Why do you always have to make everything about you? I looked at Brielle. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at her ring, twisting it round and round on her finger. Tell her, Brielle, I said, tell her this is insane. Brielle looked up. Her eyes were wide and teary. You can get married anywhere. Colette, she whispered. You have Grant. You are happy. I need this to be perfect. If it isn't perfect, Todd's parents won't. They won't respect me. I looked at them. The golden child and her manager. I turned around and walked away. I did not scream. I did not cry. I felt cold, numb. Where are you going? Marlene called after me. We are not done discussing this. I got into my car. I sat there for a long time, watching the sun dip below the horizon, casting the house I had saved into shadow. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was a text from Marlene. Let's have lunch on Sunday to talk. Clear and fair. We need to settle this like adults. Bring Grant if you want. 1200 p.m. The Onyx. I looked at the message. Then I looked at the house one last time. She wanted to settle it. She wanted clarity. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had been given by a colleague at work. A woman who had gone through a vicious divorce the year before. Dana Klein, law. A voice answered after 2 rings. Hi, I said, my voice steady for the first time in hours. My name is Colette Sinclair. I need to hire you for a consultation. And I need you to bring the most intimidating forensic accountant you know. I put the car in drive. They wanted a meeting. I was going to give them a war. The air in the private room at the Onyx had grown stale, thick with the scent of lilies from the corner vase and the sharp, metallic tang of my own adrenaline. I sat very still, my hands folded in my lap, watching Wade Mercer slide the document closer to me. It moved across the polished mahogany with a dry hiss. This is the cleanest way. Colette, Wade said, his voice dropping to a confidential, almost sympathetic register. It was a salesman's voice, designed to make capitulation sound like victory. No litigation, no messy discovery phase, no public records that might embarrass your fiancé's family. Just a signature, and we dissolve the previous verbal agreements. You walk away clean. I looked at the paper. The header read, Venue Assignment and Release, but the legal language below it was a gag order wrapped in a property transfer. Marlene leaned forward, placing her hand over mine. Her palm was cold. Darling, look at the big picture, she said, her tone dripping with that weaponized maternal concern she had perfected over 2 decades. You have already won. You have Grant. You have a stable career. You have a life that Brielle is just starting to build. She squeezed my hand. Hard enough to bruise. Brielle is younger. She needs a perfect start. You are strong enough to handle a change of plans. Brielle. Well, you know she breaks under pressure. Why would you want to take this away from her when you already have so much? I pulled my hand away slowly. So because I am competent, I deserve less, I asked. It is not about less. Marlene snapped, her patience fraying. It is about equity. You are marrying Holloway. You can afford to get married on the moon if you want to. Brielle does not have those resources. This venue is the family's contribution to her future. I turned my gaze to Brielle. She was shredding a paper cocktail napkin, her eyes wide and glassy. I do not want to fight you. Colette, Brielle whispered, her voice trembling. But Todd's aunt has already booked her flight from London. My friends have bought non-refundable tickets. If we change the venue now, I will look like a fraud. I told everyone it was the Legacy estate. I told them it was my dream. You told them it was your dream after you watched me restore it for 6 months. I said, my voice flat. You watched me sand the floors. You watched me pay for the lights. And you said nothing. Brielle looked down. I thought you would want me to be happy. Wade tapped the table with his index finger, drawing my attention back to the contract. Ms. Sinclair, let us deal with the reality of the situation. The venue is owned by the trust. Your mother is the executor. If you do not sign this release, you are essentially trespassing on a scheduled family event. And if I do not sign, I asked, looking him dead in the eye. Wade leaned back, buttoning his suit jacket. If you do not sign, The family will be forced to file a civil suit to clarify the usage rights. We will tie up your deposit funds in escrow for months, perhaps years. We will file a restraining order to prevent unauthorized vendors from entering the property. And frankly, we will make sure the narrative in the community reflects that you are harassing your younger sister during her wedding week. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. It was not a happy smile. It was the involuntary reflex of someone who realizes the safety mechanism on the gun has just been clicked off. You are threatening to sue me for a venue I paid to renovate. I summarized. We are protecting family assets. Wade corrected. I looked around the table again. 1, 2, 3. That is a lot of people, I said softly, picking up the pen and twirling it between my fingers. 3 people convinced one daughter to disappear. It seems like overkill. Does it not? Marlene sighed, exasperated. Just sign the paper. Colette, stop counting. Stop analyzing. Just be a good sister for once in your life. I set the pen down. I did not uncap it. I have a question. I said. Wade checked his watch. Make it quick. If this is a simple family transfer, and if the trust owns the property entirely as you say, why is this a release of liability and not a standard venue contract, I asked. Why does Clause 4 explicitly forbid me from contacting the county clerk regarding the property title? The room went deadly silent. Marlene's eyes darted to Wade. Wade stiffened. Standard boilerplate. Wade said, Too quickly. It does not feel standard. I said, It feels like you are afraid of what I might find if I look too closely at who actually owns Seabriar House. Marlene stood up. That is enough. You are being paranoid and vindictive. Sign the paper or get out. I picked up my phone from where it lay face down on the table. The screen was dark, but I knew the message I had sent 2 minutes ago had been delivered. I am not signing, I said, and I am not getting out. Wade stood up now, his face reddening. Then we are done here. I will be contacting the sheriff's department to 3. Sharp knocks on the door cut him off. The sound was heavy, authoritative. It was not the knock of a waiter. It was the knock of a process server, or perhaps an executioner. Marlene froze. Who is that? I did not answer. I just watched the door handle turn. The heavy oak door swung open, and the ambient noise of the restaurant, the clinking of silverware, the murmur of conversation flooded in for a brief second before being blocked by the figures standing in the frame. Harrison Holloway stepped into the room first. I had seen Grant's father in tuxedos at galas, and in polo shirts on the golf course, but I had never seen him like this. He was wearing a charcoal suit that looked like it had been tailored from storm clouds. He did not look angry. He looked efficient. He looked like a man who bought companies just to dismantle them for spare parts. Behind him was Dana Klein. She was smaller, sharp-featured, holding a leather briefcase against her chest like a weapon. Her eyes scanned the room and landed on Wade Mercer with the predatory focus of a hawk spotting a field mouse. Harrison walked to the table. He did not ask for permission. He pulled out the empty chair next to me, the one I had pointedly left vacant, and sat down. Dana remained standing, placing her briefcase on the table with a heavy thud. Marlene sank back into her chair, her hand flying to her throat. Harrison, what? What are you doing here? Harrison ignored her. He looked at Wade Mercer, then down at the paperwork in front of me. He reached out, picked up the venue assignment and release, and read the title. He let out a short, dry chuckle. It was a terrifying sound. I apologize for the interruption, Harrison said, his voice calm and leveled. But my future daughter-in-law sent me a text message saying she was being asked to sign a legal document without counsel present. He looked up at Wade. And I know you are not her lawyer, Wade, because if you were, you would know that coercion is grounds for immediate disbarment. Wade opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He looked at Marlene, then back at Harrison. Mr. Holloway, this is a private family matter. It stopped being a private family matter when you threatened to sue the woman marrying my son. Harrison said. Dana Klein stepped forward. She did not introduce herself. She just opened her briefcase and pulled out a single, thin file. I am Dana Klein, representing Ms. Sinclair, she said, and before anyone signs anything, I have a few questions about the preamble of this contract. Marlene found her voice. She tried to sound authoritative, but it came out shrill. You have no right to be here. This is Sinclair property business. Colette, tell them to leave. I looked at my mother. For the first time in my life, I did not feel the urge to obey. I felt a strange, cold clarity. They stay. I said. Dana slid the file across the table toward Wade. It stopped right on top of the release form. You are asking my client to release her rights to Seabriar House based on the claim that the Sinclair Family Trust is the sole owner, Dana said. That is correct, Wade said, straightening his tie. Then perhaps you can explain this, Dana said. She flipped the file open. Inside was a photocopy of a deed, stamped with the official seal of the county clerk. We ran a title search this morning, Dana continued, her voice razor-sharp. Seabriar House is not held by the Sinclair Family Trust. The trust was dissolved 6 months ago due to insolvency. Marlene gasped. It was a wet, choking sound. Dana pointed to the highlighted line on the document. The property is currently held by a limited liability company called Azure Coast Holdings. Wade's face went the color of old ash. Dana leaned in, her hands flat on the table, and according to the filing, Azure Coast Holdings has 3 liens against the property for unpaid property taxes and a defaulted renovation loan. I looked at my mother. She was not looking at me. She was staring at the table, her hands trembling so violently that her diamond bracelets rattled against the wood. You do not own the venue, I whispered. Harrison spoke then, his voice low and dangerous. You are not asking her to sign a release because you want to be fair to Brielle, he said. You are asking her to sign a release because you need her renovation investment to legitimize the asset, so you can refinance the debt. He looked at Brielle, who was staring at her mother with horror dawning on her face. You are not planning a wedding, Harrison said. You are staging an open house for creditors. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb that had just stopped ticking and was taking its final breath before the explosion. Dana looked at Wade, who was frantically shoving papers back into his folder. So, Dana said, smiling a smile that showed too many teeth. Who exactly are we negotiating with? Because if you do not own the building, I do not think you have the authority to ban anyone from the premises. Marlene looked up then. Her eyes were wild, desperate. It is a misunderstanding, she stammered. The paperwork. It is in transition. Harrison stood up. He buttoned his jacket. I think we are done with the appetizers, he said. Colette, Dana, I believe we have some phone calls to make. As we stood to leave, I looked back at the contract on the table. It looked like trash now, just useless paper. But as I turned to go, I saw Marlene's face. It wasn't the face of a mother who had been caught. It was the face of a gambler who had just lost her last chip. I knew, with a sinking feeling in my gut, that she was about to do something desperate. You cannot leave, Marlene shrieked, her voice cracking. You cannot leave the vendors. The money. Colette, you cannot do this to me. I paused at the door. I looked at the woman who had promised me a wedding and given me a trap. I did not do this to you. Mom, I said, you did this when you decided one daughter was a customer and the other was a product. I walked out, but as the door closed, I heard Brielle ask the question that would burn the house down. Mom, she said, her voice small and terrified. Mom, what does he mean about the debt? The door clicked shut, and the real war began. The silence following the dinner at the Onyx did not last long. It was replaced, less than 12 hours later, by the digital equivalent of a scream. I woke up the next morning with a headache that felt like a vice grip, hoping for a quiet day to strategize with Dana. Instead, I woke up to a notification from Facebook. My mother had posted a status update. It was classic Marlene Sinclair. She had not named me directly. She was too smart for that. Instead, she had posted a picture of an old, withered tree standing alone on a cliffside, accompanied by a caption that was designed to garner maximum sympathy while acting as a dog whistle for the entire extended family. It breaks a mother's heart when a child forgets where they came from. She wrote, I spent my life giving everything to my daughters. But sometimes money changes people. It turns gratitude into entitlement. We can only pray that they find their way back to the values of family and sacrifice. Heartbroken family first betrayal. I stared at the screen, my coffee turning cold in my hand. The comments were already rolling in. There were prayer hand emojis from my aunts in Delaware. There were angry face reactions from cousins I had not seen in a decade. Stay strong. Marlene, my Aunt Linda commented. Some birds fly away and forget the nest. I felt a surge of nausea. She was flipping the narrative. In her version of the story, I was not the daughter who had paid $35,000 to renovate a crumbling estate. I was the rich, arrogant sellout who was bullying her poor sister and abandoning her struggling mother. By noon, the text messages started arriving. Colette, I saw your mom's post. My cousin Sarah texted, "Is it true you are trying to kick Brielle out of the venue? That is really low, even for you." Then came a message from my godmother, a woman I had respected my entire life. "You need to be the bigger person. Colette, you have done well for yourself. Brielle needs this win. Do not let greed ruin your relationship with your mother." They did not know about the forged contract. They did not know about the debt. They only knew what Marlene fed them, a diet of half-truths and emotional manipulation. I wanted to scream. I wanted to post screenshots of my bank statements. I wanted to upload the recording of Wade Mercer threatening me. But Dana had been clear. Do not engage. She had told me, anything you post can be used to paint you as unstable. Let them talk. We deal in facts. But the facts were getting harder to stomach, especially when I opened Instagram and saw what Brielle was doing. She had gone on the offensive. If Marlene was playing the sad victim, Brielle was playing the triumphant victor. She had posted a series of photos to her story. The first one was a mood board featuring the exact color palette I had spent 3 months curating: dusty blue and sage green. "So excited to finalize the details for our dream day at Seabriar," she wrote. The next photo was a picture of the gazebo I had paid to repaint. "Cannot wait to say I do right here." She captioned it, "Sinclair Legacy." Seabriar wedding, but the third photo was the one that made my blood run cold. It was a screenshot of a floral arrangement, white hydrangeas and eucalyptus, and right in the center of the photo, she had tagged the vendor, my vendor, the florist I had hired, the florist I had paid a $2,000 deposit to. I felt a sudden, sharp panic. I closed the app and dialed the florist immediately. "Hello, this is Blooming Coast Designs." A cheerful voice answered. "Hi, this is Colette Sinclair," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I am calling to check on my order for September 14th. There was a pause on the other end. The sound of a keyboard clacking. "Oh, hi," the florist said, sounding confused. "I actually just got off the phone with your planner. We updated the contract this morning." "My planner?" I asked. "I do not have a planner. I am planning this myself." The voice on the other end hesitated. "Oh, well, a woman named Marlene called. She said she was taking over the coordination for the Sinclair wedding. She said you were too busy with work and that we should change the contact name to Brielle to streamline the communication." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Did she change the name on the booking?" I asked. "Yes," the florist said, and she added 3 more centerpieces for the head table. I sent the updated invoice to the email on file. "Which email?" I asked. "It is the Gmail address." The florist said, sinclairweddingplanning@gmail.com. I closed my eyes. That was not my email. "I need you to listen to me very carefully," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "I did not authorize that change. I am the one who signed the contract. I am the one who paid the deposit. If you take instructions from anyone else, you are in breach of contract." There was a stunned silence. "But she said she was your mother. She said it was a family account." I hung up. I could not breathe. It was happening with all of them. I spent the next hour calling every single vendor, the lighting company, the valet service, the luxury restroom rental. The story was the same everywhere. Marlene had called first thing in the morning. She had used her charm, her authority as the property owner, and her lie about me being too busy to switch the primary contact to Brielle. She had hijacked my entire wedding infrastructure in less than 4 hours. When Grant came home that evening, I was sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by printed emails, shaking with rage. "They stole it," I whispered. "They actually stole it." Grant looked at the papers. He saw the florist's updated invoice addressed to Brielle Sinclair. His face, usually so calm and kind, hardened into something I had never seen before. He pulled out his phone and hit the dial. He put it on speaker. "Hello," Marlene's voice answered. She sounded breezy, unbothered. "Marlene, this is Grant," he said. "Oh, hello, Grant," she said. "I suppose Colette has been filling your head with nonsense. I want to know why you impersonated Colette to her vendors," Grant said. His voice was low, devoid of politeness. "I want to know why you are committing fraud." Marlene laughed. It was a dismissive, airy sound. "Fraud? Oh, honey, do not use big words you do not understand. I am simply helping my daughters manage a family event. Colette was overwhelmed. I took it off her plate. You took her name off the contracts," Grant said. "It is the same family," Marlene said, her tone sharpening. "Look, Grant, I know you come from a different world. I know your family has lawyers on retainer and checks with lots of zeros. But this is how real families work. We share. We help the ones who need it. Colette has you. She has your money. She can get married at the Ritz if she wants. Brielle has nothing. Why are you so obsessed with taking this one thing away from her?" "Because Colette paid for it?" Grant shouted. He never shouted. "And she will be reimbursed," Marlene yelled back, "when the trust settles. But right now, you are being a bully. You are using your money to intimidate us. If you want to marry my daughter, you should learn to respect her mother." She hung up. Grant threw his phone onto the couch. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room. "She is twisting everything," he said. "She is making us the villains because we can afford to lose the money. She knows exactly what she is doing." I said, "She is using class guilt. She knows that if we fight her, we look like the rich oppressors crushing the poor single mother and the struggling sister." I looked at the pile of papers. "But this isn't about money anymore, Grant. This is about erasure. She is trying to erase me." Later that night, Harrison came over. He did not knock. He just texted Grant that he was outside. We let him in. He sat in the armchair, listening as I explained the vendor situation. He did not look surprised. He looked like a man who had seen this pattern 1,000 times in boardroom takeovers. "She is consolidating control," Harrison said quietly. "She needs the event to happen under her name, or at least under a name she controls. Brielle is just a proxy. Why, I asked, why does she care so much about a wedding? Because she needs a show," Harrison said. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "I had my team look into Azure Coast Holdings, the LLC that technically owns Seabriar House," he continued. "It is a shell company. It was set up 3 years ago, right after your father died." And Grant asked, "And it has no income," Harrison said. "It has only debts. The property taxes are 2 years behind. The bank has initiated pre-foreclosure proceedings twice in the last 6 months. Each time, Marlene managed to stall them. How, I asked. By promising a capital infusion. Harrison said, by showing them contracts for future revenue." I stared at him. "What future revenue?" "It is a private home." Harrison looked at me, his gray eyes piercing. "Not anymore. I found a listing on a boutique event venue site. It was created 4 weeks ago. Seabriar House is listed as a premier wedding destination. I felt the room spin. She is turning it into a business," I whispered. Harrison nodded. "And she needs a launch event. She needs a high-end, picture-perfect wedding to show investors and the bank that the property is viable. She needs a portfolio. And she used my money to build the portfolio," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. The landscaping, the lights, the luxury tent vendor. "Exactly," Harrison said. "She could not afford the renovations to make the venue rentable. So she got you to pay for them under the guise of a family wedding. Now that the work is done, she needs to control the event to ensure she gets the marketing material. If you get married there, you control the photos. You control the narrative. If Brielle gets married there, Marlene runs the show." I felt sick. It wasn't just favoritism. It was a business plan. I was not a daughter to her. I was an angel investor who didn't know I was investing. My phone pinged. It was an email from Dana. I opened it. The subject line was simply evidence. Attached was a PDF. It was a chain of emails between Marlene and the tent rental company, the most expensive vendor I had hired. I read the highlighted section. Subject change of contact from Sinclair. weddingplanning@gmail.com. To Elite Tents Events. Please note that Colette Sinclair is no longer authorized to make decisions regarding the September event. She has been removed from the planning committee due to a medical issue. Please direct all future invoices to Marlene Sinclair. We will be retaining the current setup specifications. A medical issue. She was telling vendors I was sick. She was painting me as incompetent, mentally unstable, or physically incapacitated to justify the takeover. I looked up at Grant and Harrison. The tears that had been threatening to fall all day suddenly dried up. The hurt I felt, the deep, aching wound of being unloved, began to cauterize into something harder. She told them I was sick. I said, my voice steady. Harrison leaned forward. That is tortious interference, he said, and it is defamation. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. I was done crying. I was done hoping that if I just explained myself better, if I just loved them enough, they would treat me like family. You cannot love people who see you as a commodity. You can only audit them. I turned back to them. I do not want to just stop her. I said, I want to expose it. I want every single person in that town to know exactly who owns that house and how they paid for the paint on the walls. Harrison smiled. It was a small, cold smile. Then we need to get the bank involved, he said, but before we could formulate a plan, Dana sent a second email. I clicked it open. Colette. The text read, call me, now. We found something else. It is not just the property taxes. I dialed Dana's number. She answered on the first ring. What is it? I asked. Colette? Are you sitting down? Dana asked. Yes. We pulled the loan documents for the renovation loan Marlene took out against the house last year. Dana said, the one that is in default. Okay. The loan required a guarantor. Dana said, someone with a steady income and a high credit score. Marlene's credit is shot. My heart stopped. Colette, Dana said, her voice grave. Your name is on the loan. I dropped the phone. It wasn't just the wedding. She hadn't just stolen my venue. She had stolen my identity. The war just turned nuclear. The morning after the revelation about the loan was not spent in tears. It was spent in a conference room at Dana Klein's office, a space that smelled of stale coffee and laser printer toner. The view from the window was a gray cityscape, matching the color of my mood. We are not dealing with a mother anymore. Colette, Dana said, pacing the length of the room. She had kicked off her heels hours ago and was walking in her stockings. We are dealing with a hostile entity. And to beat a hostile entity, we do not need feelings. We need a paper trail. She dropped a heavy cardboard box onto the table. I need you to go through every single transaction you have made in the last 12 months. Dana instructed. Every Venmo transfer, every check, every credit card swipe. If you bought a pack of gum near Seabriar House, I want to see the receipt. I sat down and opened my laptop. Grant sat next to me, his face grim, opening his own banking app. Harrison had sent over a junior forensic accountant named Mark, a young man who typed faster than anyone I had ever seen and spoke in a language of codes and ledgers. For the next 4 hours, we dissected my life. It was humiliating. There is no other word for it. To look at your bank statement and see the evidence of your own manipulation laid out in black and white is a specific kind of torture. Here, I said, highlighting a row on the spreadsheet, $3,500, March 12th. What was the memo? Mark asked, his fingers hovering over his keyboard. I squinted at the screen. Family improvement. I read. Mark sighed. Vague. Legally, that could be argued as a gift. I scrolled down. Here's another one. $6,000, April 4th. Memo says, house stuff. Dana stopped pacing. House stuff, not electrical upgrade, not venue payment. No, I whispered, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. Mom told me to keep it casual so the tax man would not get suspicious. She said it was better to keep it under the radar. I was such an idiot, I said, putting my head in my hands. I was helping her evade taxes while she was setting me up to pay for her property flip. It is not stupidity. Colette, Grant said softly, placing a hand on my back. It is trust. She banked on the fact that you would not treat your mother like a business partner. Mark cleared his throat. I am looking at the public records for the property itself. Seabriar House. What do you see? Dana asked. It is a mess, Mark said. Marlene has been telling you it is held by the Sinclair Trust, and we know that trust is dissolved. But the current holder, Azure Coast Holdings, is not just a shell, it is a nesting doll. Explain, Harrison said from the corner of the room, where he had been reading a file. Azure Coast is registered in Nevada, Mark said. But the registered agent links back to a defunct entity called Sinclair Heritage Partners. That was your grandfather's old real estate firm. Wasn't it? I nodded. Grandpa closed it 10 years ago. Mark turned his screen around so we could see. Marlene reactivated the entity 18 months ago. She listed herself as the sole managing member. But here is the kicker. She listed the property usage not as residential, but as commercial mixed use. I stared at the screen. Commercial. She rezoned it, Dana said, her eyes narrowing. She quietly rezoned the family estate while telling you it was just a sentimental old house. And look at the lien history, Mark pointed out. There is the primary mortgage, then a second mortgage was taken out 3 years ago, then a bridge loan from a private lender, basically a shark, taken out 6 months ago. That is the one with the high interest rate. The one she used my identity to guarantee, I asked. Mark nodded. It looks like it. But here's the timeline that is interesting. The bridge loan comes due in October. October, I repeated. My wedding date, or what was supposed to be my wedding date, is mid-September. The pieces started to click together in my head like a terrifying puzzle. She needs the cash flow, Harrison said, his voice low. She needs to show the private lender that the property is generating revenue before the balloon payment hits in October. If she does not, they foreclose, and she loses everything. So my wedding wasn't a gift, I said, my voice trembling with rage. It was a product launch. Harrison nodded. You were the beta test. You paid for the infrastructure. You fixed the lights, the landscaping, the plumbing. You made the product viable. And now that it is ready for market, she is kicking out the investor and bringing in the show pony. Brielle, I whispered. Brielle is the marketing campaign. Harrison agreed. Think about it. Why was Marlene so obsessed with the specific vendors? Why did she insist on the high-end florist and the luxury tent company? Because she is trying to attract a specific clientele. Dana realized she is not planning a family wedding. She is staging a showcase for potential future clients. She wants to show that Seabriar House can host a 6-figure luxury event. And she needs Brielle to be the bride because Brielle will do exactly what she is told. I said, Brielle will pose where she is told to pose. She will smile at the investors. It would have been too difficult. I would have asked questions. I looked at the invoice from the photographer. Marlene had insisted on a photographer who specialized in architectural digest-style shoots, not candid wedding emotional shots. I had thought she just wanted the house to look good. Now I knew she was building a brochure. I am an ATM, I said, feeling a cold numbness spread through my chest. I am just an emotional ATM. I deposit money, and she withdraws my future. Dana slammed her hand on the table. Not anymore. We are shutting this down. How, I asked. We send a cease and desist letter to every single vendor. Dana said, we inform them that the contracts were signed under false pretenses and that the funds used to secure their services are subject to a fraud investigation. We freeze the money, we freeze the event. But if we do that, I said, the vendors will walk. The wedding will be canceled. Exactly, Dana said. We burn the bridge before she can cross it. I hesitated. I thought about Brielle. I thought about the cousins flying in from Delaware. I thought about the humiliation. Do it, Grant said. His voice was hard. Do it. Colette, she stole your identity. She stole your money. You do not owe her a party. Dana began drafting the letters immediately. The sound of her typing was like a machine gun, but Marlene, as always, was one step ahead. 2 hours later, while we were still reviewing the legal language for the cease and desist orders, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my cousin Sarah. Got the invite. It is stunning, so happy for Brielle. I froze. Invite. I called Sarah immediately. Sarah, what invite? The wedding invite. Sarah chirped. It just came in the mail. It is gorgeous. Colette, heavy cardstock, gold foil. It must have cost a fortune. Can you send me a picture? I asked. My voice tight. Sure. A moment later, the image loaded on my screen. It was a masterpiece of stationery, elegant calligraphy on cream paper. Marlene Sinclair invites you to celebrate the marriage of her daughter, Brielle Sinclair, to Todd Miller, at the historic Seabrier Estate, Saturday, the 14th of September, my date, my venue, my flowers on the border design. But it was the bottom line that made me gasp. Accommodations provided by the Sinclair Family Trust. She had sent them out. She had physically mailed hundreds of invitations. Dana looked at the picture over my shoulder and swore softly. This is a strategic strike, Dana said. She knows we are investigating. She knows we are close to cutting off the vendors. So she created a social hostage situation. Explain, Grant said. If Colette cancels the venue now, Dana said, she is not just fighting her mother. She is canceling on Aunt Linda. She is canceling on the cousins who just bought plane tickets. She is ruining the family reunion. Marlene has positioned Brielle as the innocent bride and Colette as the only person with the power to destroy the event. I sank back into my chair. If I sue now, I am the villain. I am the jealous older sister who ruined Brielle's big day because I could not have the venue. That is exactly what she wants you to think, Harrison said. He stood up and walked to the window. She is banking on your decency. She is banking on the fact that you care about your reputation within the family more than you care about your money. He turned to look at me. Do you... I looked at the invitation on the screen. I looked at the lies printed in gold foil. I care about the truth. I said, then we need to dig deeper. Harrison said, we know why she is doing it. We know how she is doing it. Now we need the proof that destroys the narrative. We need to prove that this is not a wedding. It is a business transaction. I opened my laptop again. I logged into my old email account, the one I used to share with my mother back when I was in college helping her with her bills. I hadn't checked it in years, but I knew she sometimes used it as a backup for large file transfers. I searched for Seabrier. Hundreds of results came up. Most were my own emails forwarding invoices, but then I saw it, an email from 3 months ago. It was in the trash folder, but it hadn't been permanently deleted. Subject post-launch strategy. Seabrier sender, Marlene Sinclair. Recipient Preston Reality Group. My hands shook as I clicked it open. Dear Michael, per our discussion, we are moving forward with the showcase event in mid-September. This will demonstrate the full capacity of the estate, including the new electrical and landscaping upgrades we discussed. Once the event concludes and the media assets are secured, we should be ready to list the property for long-term commercial lease by October 1st. I have a tenant interested in taking over the entire estate as a dedicated wedding factory. The projected revenue from the lease will cover the bridge loan and the arrears. We just need to get through the September launch. The family is fully on board. I read the last line again. The family is fully on board. I looked up at the room. My eyes were dry, but my heart was burning with a cold. White fire. She is not keeping the house, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. What Dana asked, I turned the laptop around. She is not saving the legacy. I said, she is flipping it. She is using Brielle's wedding to stage the house so she can lease it out to a commercial operator. Harrison read the email. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were hard. A wedding factory. He read, she is going to turn your family home into a rental hall, and she used my money to renovate it for the new tenant. I said, and she is using Brielle to cut the ribbon. I stood up. The fear of being the villain was gone. The fear of Aunt Linda's judgment was gone. She told everyone I was jealous. I said, she told everyone I was abandoning the family. But she is the one selling us out. Literally. I looked at Dana. Do not just send the cease and desist letters. I said. Dana raised an eyebrow. What do you want to do? I want to file an injunction, I said, and I want to attach this email to the filing. I want it to be a matter of public record. Harrison nodded approvingly. That is the nuclear option. Colette, once that is filed, there is no going back. The family will read it. The vendors will read it. Brielle will read it. I looked at the invitation on the screen one last time. Accommodations provided by the Sinclair Family Trust. There is no family trust, I said. There is only a lie, and I am done paying for it. File it, I told Dana. But as Dana began to type the motion, a thought occurred to me. Marlene was desperate. She was facing foreclosure, bankruptcy, and now, public exposure. A cornered animal does not just surrender, it bites. I checked the date on the email again. October 1st. That was the deadline. She has 2 weeks after the wedding to close the deal. I murmured, which means, Harrison said, his voice grave. She cannot afford for this wedding to fail, not even a little bit. If you stop this event, Colette, you are not just canceling a party, you are bankrupting her. I looked at him. Good, I said, but I underestimated her. I thought the invitation was her big move. I was wrong. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was not a family member. It was the HR director at Northwind Harbor Systems, my company. Colette, the director said, her voice sounding strained. We need you to come in for a meeting tomorrow morning. It is regarding an anonymous ethics complaint we received about you misusing company resources for personal real estate ventures. I stared at the phone. She had called my job. She was not just trying to win. She was trying to destroy my ability to fight back. I looked at Grant. She called my boss. I said numbly. Grant stood up. That is it. We are done playing defense. He turned to his father. Dad, Grant said, call the bank. Buy the debt. Harrison smiled. I already have the paperwork right here, he said, patting his briefcase. I was just waiting for Colette to give the order. I looked at the 2 men standing beside me. I looked at Dana, who was already drafting a defamation suit. Buy it, I said. Buy it all. The following morning, Grant drove us into the city to meet his father. I expected the Holloway family office to be something out of a movie, with marble floors, gold leaf ceilings, and receptionists who looked like runway models. I expected a display of wealth that screamed dominance. I was wrong. The offices of Holloway Capital were located on the 14th floor of a nondescript steel building in the financial district. There was no signage in the lobby. The office itself was quiet, carpeted in muted gray, and smelled of nothing but filtered air and efficiency. There were no oil paintings of ancestors. There were only whiteboards, glass walls, and people working in hushed tones. It was not a palace. It was an engine room. Harrison met us in a conference room that contained nothing but a long table and a view of the harbor. He was wearing a sweater and slacks, looking more like a retired professor than a corporate shark. Dana was already there, arranging her files with military precision. Sit down. Colette, Harrison said, gesturing to the chair next to him. I sat. I felt small. I felt like a fraud. I was about to ask this man to use his resources to fight a war I had started with a checkbook I should have kept closed. Mr. Holloway, I began, my voice shaking slightly. I want you to know that I never wanted this. I did not want to drag your family into a financial brawl with mine. I can handle the legal fees. I can pay you back. Harrison held up a hand. His skin was papery, but his grip on the table was firm. Stop, he said. He did not say it unkindly, but there was no room for argument. I am not doing this because I enjoy throwing money at problems. Colette, and I'm certainly not doing it because I want to buy a victory for my son. If this were a simple matter of you and your sister fighting over a party date, I would tell you to flip a coin and move on. He leaned forward, his gray eyes locking onto mine. But this is not a fight over a date. This is fraud, and I do not tolerate people who use my family as collateral for their schemes. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "My team finished the due diligence on Seabriar House this morning," he said. I looked at the paper. It was a dense web of numbers and dates. "Dana, if you would," Harrison said. Dana stood up. She looked energized, like she finally had the ammunition she needed. "We knew about the bridge loan," Dana said. "But what we did not know was the condition of that loan. The lender is a private equity group called Ironclad Capital. They specialize in distressed assets." She pointed to a line on the document. "The loan agreement has a performance clause," Dana explained. "Marlene did not just borrow money against the house. She borrowed money against the business plan. She promised Ironclad Capital that by October 1st, the property would have a confirmed commercial valuation of $2.5 million. And how does she get that valuation, I asked, though I was starting to guess the answer. By demonstrating revenue potential. Harrison answered. He stood up and walked to the whiteboard. He picked up a black marker. To get a commercial valuation on a residential property, you need comparables, Harrison said, writing the number 100,000 on the board. You need to prove that the venue can command a 6-figure fee for a single weekend. He turned to look at me. That is why she needs Brielle's wedding to look like a royal coronation. She needs the aerial shots. She needs the high-end catering trucks in the driveway. She needs the luxury tenting. She is not creating a memory. Colette. She is creating a brochure for the bank appraiser who is scheduled to visit the property on September 16th. September 16th, I whispered. That is the Monday after the wedding. Exactly, Harrison said. If the wedding happens, and it looks expensive, she gets her valuation. She refinances the debt, pays off the sharks, and keeps the house. And if the wedding does not happen, Grant asked. Harrison capped the marker. If the wedding does not happen, or if it looks like a budget backyard party, the valuation fails. The loan is called in immediately, and since she personally guaranteed it, she loses the house, her own home, and every asset she has left. The room fell silent. The stakes were no longer just about hurt feelings or stolen dates. I held the power to destroy my mother's entire financial existence. She is desperate. I said, that is why she forged the contracts. That is why she called my boss. She is terrified. She should be. Harrison said, but panic is not an excuse for criminality. Dana sat down. So, here is the legal strategy. We filed an emergency injunction today. We claim unjust enrichment. We argue that Marlene used your funds to improve the property under the verbal contract of a wedding, and then breached that contract to capitalize on the improvements for herself. We asked the judge to freeze the venue. Dana continued, no events allowed until the ownership of the improvements is settled. If we do that, the wedding is dead, Grant said. The sheriff will padlock the gates, and Marlene defaults on the loan. Harrison added. I looked down at my hands. I felt a wave of nausea. I hated what she had done to me. I hated the lies, but the idea of actively pushing the button that would leave my mother homeless, it made my stomach turn. I do not want to destroy her, I whispered. I just want out. I want my money back, and I want my name off her mess. I do not want to be the one who swings the axe. Harrison watched me for a long moment. Then he nodded, as if I had passed a test I did not know I was taking. That is why you are a good person, Colette, he said. And that is why you cannot be the one to handle the money side of this. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a phone. It was an old-fashioned flip phone. I am not going to ask you to bankrupt your mother. Harrison said, I am going to handle the debt myself. What do you mean? I asked. I made a call to Ironclad Capital this morning. Harrison said calmly, I have done business with them before. They are not sentimental people. They just want their return. He paused, letting the words sink in. I have offered to purchase the note. Harrison said. I stared at him. You are buying her debt. You are going to be her lender. Harrison nodded. By 5 o'clock today, I will hold the mortgage on Seabriar House. I will control the bridge loan. But why, I asked, why would you spend millions of dollars on a bad asset to close the door? Harrison said. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to that steel tone I had heard at the restaurant. As long as Ironclad holds the debt, Marlene thinks she can scam her way out of it. She thinks she can pull off this wedding, fool the appraiser, and survive. But if I hold the debt, the game is over. I do not need a valuation. I do not need a brochure. He looked at Grant, then back at me. I will offer her a choice, Harrison said. She can cancel the wedding, admit the fraud, and I will give her a structured exit. I will let her sell the property quietly, pay off what she owes, and walk away with her dignity intact. Or she can continue this fight, and I will foreclose on her the minute the ink is dry on the transfer. I felt tears prick my eyes. He was building a fire escape for the woman who had tried to burn me down. You would do that, I asked. You would let her walk away. Harrison shrugged. I am not interested in vengeance, Colette. I am interested in ending the noise so my son and his wife can have a life. I looked at Grant. He reached for my hand. Let him do it, Grant said. It is the only way to stop her without becoming her, but it feels wrong. I said, I do not want you to spend your money fighting my battles. I do not want this to be a war of bank accounts. It makes me feel like I am just as bad as she is, using money to solve emotional problems. Harrison stood up then. He walked around the table and stood behind my chair. He did not touch me, but his presence was like a shield. Colette, listen to me, he said. I turned to look at him. You are worried that using money makes you dirty, he said. You think that by bringing resources into this, you are validating her worldview. He shook his head. You are wrong. You did not make this about money. They did. They made it about money the moment they looked at you and saw a wallet instead of a daughter. They made it about money when they put that pen in front of you and asked you to sign away your rights for a tax break. He pointed to the window, to the city below. When someone tries to rob you, you do not apologize for having a lock on your door. Buying this debt is not an attack. It is the lock. I took a deep breath. He was right. Marlene had turned our relationship into a transaction years ago. I was just finally demanding a receipt. Okay, I said. Do it. Buy the note. Harrison nodded once. He did not smile. He just opened his phone and dialed a number. Execute the transfer. He said into the phone, Wire the funds. He snapped the phone shut. Now, he said, turning back to us. We have dealt with the fire. Now we need to deal with the wedding. I looked at the calendar on the wall. It was the 20th of August. My date was less than 4 weeks away. I do not have a venue, I said, feeling the weight of the loss crash down on me again. Even if we stop her, I have lost Seabriar. I cannot get married there now. It is tainted. Harrison looked at Grant. They exchanged looks that I could not read. We anticipated that, Harrison said. He walked over to a side table and picked up a thick envelope. Colette, I know you wanted a garden wedding. I know you wanted history. I know you wanted something that felt like a legacy. He handed me the envelope. I have a property, Harrison said. It is not in Newport Mesa. It is about an hour north, in the wine country. It is a vineyard that has been in the Holloway family for 3 generations. We do not rent it out. We do not use it for business. It is just home. I opened the envelope. Inside were photos of rolling hills, ancient oak trees that dwarfed the ones at Seabriar, and a stone house that looked like it had grown out of the earth. I want you to have it, Harrison said. For the 14th of September, I looked up at him. But the vendors, the planning, it is all at Seabriar. Most of your vendors are mobile, Grant said, squeezing my hand. The tent, the lighting, the flowers, we can redirect them. The ones who are loyal to your mother, we fire them. We hire new ones. Dad's team can help with the logistics, but I cannot ask you to do that. I stammered. It is too much. You are not asking, Harrison said. I am offering, because I want my son to get married in a place where he is welcome, and I want his bride to walk down an aisle that was not paved with blackmail. He looked at me with a kindness that made my throat tight. You choose the day. Colette, you choose the music. You choose the guest list. Leave the rest to us. I looked at the photos. It was beautiful. It was peaceful. It was everything Seabriar pretended to be, but without the rot beneath the floorboards. Okay, I whispered. Okay. Just then, Dana's laptop pinged, a loud, jarring notification sound. She looked at the screen, and her face went hard. "Well," she said, "it seems Marlene is not going to wait for the buyout offer." "What is it?" I asked. Dana turned the screen toward us. It was an email from Wade Mercer. To the legal representatives of Colette Sinclair, please be advised that we are filing a counterclaim for breach of familial contract and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We are claiming that Ms. Sinclair entered into a verbal binding agreement to support the family estate, and her sudden withdrawal and harassment of the current tenant, Brielle Sinclair, has caused significant financial and reputational damage. We are seeking damages in the amount of $150,000 to be paid immediately to cover the cost of rush fees and security required to protect the venue from Ms. Sinclair's aggression. I stared at the screen. She was suing me. She was suing me for $150,000 because I refused to let her steal my wedding. Harrison read the email over my shoulder. He did not look angry. He looked almost bored. "Breach of familial contract," he muttered. "That is a new one." He looked at me. "She thinks this is a poker game," Harrison said. "She thinks she just raised the bet." He picked up his briefcase. "She does not realize," he said, his voice cold and final, "that she is playing at a table that I just bought." He turned to Dana. "Do not respond," Harrison instructed. "Let her file. Let her put it on the public record that she thinks her daughter owes her 6 figures for existing." He walked to the door. "We are not going to court," Harrison said. "We are going to let her hang herself with her own rope, and when she runs out of slack, I will pull the chair." The weekend of the so-called venue reveal arrived with the subtlety of a hurricane in the world my mother had constructed. This event was supposed to be the victory lap. It was designed to be the moment where she cemented the narrative, locked in the vendors, and proved to the bank and the doubting relatives that Seabriar House was the premier destination she claimed it was. I did not attend. I was 30 miles away, sitting in my living room with Grant, watching the entire train wreck unfold through the glowing rectangle of my iPad. Brielle was live streaming. The camera panned across the lawn I had paid to reseed. It swept over the gazebo I had paid to paint. It lingered on the string lights I had purchased, which were now twinkling in the twilight, casting a golden glow over a crowd of about 50 people. I saw my aunts. I saw my cousins. I saw the neighbors who used to wave to me when I was gardening. And then, the camera found Marlene. She was standing on the steps of the porch, holding a microphone, wearing a dress that was slightly too white for a mother of the bride. She looked radiant, in that terrifying, brittle way she always did when she was getting away with something. "Thank you all for coming," Marlene said, her voice amplified by the sound system I had put a deposit on. "It has been a difficult few months. As many of you know, we have had some unexpected changes in the family." She paused for effect. A hush fell over the crowd. But, she continued, her voice trembling with practiced emotion, "A mother's job is to protect her children's dreams. Even when one child decides to walk away, to abandon their heritage, we do not let the light go out. We rally. We rebuild. And tonight, I am so proud to present the future of the Sinclair legacy, Brielle and Todd's wedding venue." The crowd applauded. I saw my Aunt Linda wiping a tear. I saw a cousin shaking her head, presumably muttering about how ungrateful I was. "She is good," Grant said, his voice dry. "She managed to call you a traitor without using your name once." I watched as Brielle stepped up to the microphone. She was beaming, clinging to Todd's arm. Todd looked terrified, like he had just realized he was marrying into a cult. But Brielle was in her element. "This is a dream come true," Brielle gushed. "I know there have been rumors, but I just want to say, love wins. And this house, it is ready for us. It was a perfect production. It was a masterpiece of social engineering. And then, Dana Klein fired the torpedo. We had timed it perfectly. At 7:30, just as the appetizers were being circulated, Dana's office sent out a mass notification to every single vendor tagged in Brielle's posts or listed on the invoices I had provided. It was a formal notice of disputed contract. It informed them that the funds used to secure their services were subject to active litigation regarding fraud and unjust enrichment, and that any further performance of services on the property could involve them in a criminal conspiracy investigation. I watched the screen. At 7:35, the owner of the lighting company, a man named Steve who was standing near the back of the crowd, checked his phone. I saw him frown. I saw him tap the screen, read something, and then look up at the lights strung above the patio. He walked over to the DJ, who was also looking at his phone with a confused expression. Within 10 minutes, the energy of the party shifted. It was subtle at first. A few waiters stopped circulating trays and huddled in the corner. The valet manager walked up the porch steps and whispered something to Marlene. I saw Marlene's smile falter. She waved him away, but he did not move. He held up his phone. Marlene stepped away from the crowd, her hand gripping her champagne glass so hard I thought it would shatter. She was arguing. I could not hear the words, but I knew the body language. It was the stance of a woman trying to pay a bill with a smile because her credit card had been declined. Grant pointed at the screen. Look at the caterer. Elias, the man from Salt and Sage, was packing up a carving station. He wasn't waiting for the end of the event. He was packing up in the middle of the cocktail hour. Brielle noticed it too. She ran over to Elias, grabbing his arm. I saw her mouth the words, "What are you doing?" Elias shook his head and handed her a piece of paper, probably a printout of the email on his phone. He gestured to his staff. They started pulling trays of crab cakes off the tables. The guests were starting to whisper. Aunt Linda looked confused. The illusion was cracking, but Marlene was a fighter. She grabbed the microphone again. Everyone she called out, her voice a little too high, a little too shrill. Please, do not worry about the staff. We are just transitioning to the next phase of the evening. Please, enjoy the wine. There is plenty of wine. She was trying to hold back the tide with a cocktail napkin, and that was when the twist arrived. I did not know this was going to happen. Neither did Grant. This was the universe deciding to pile on. A white Ford Explorer pulled into the driveway, right behind the valet stand. It had the seal of the county on the door. A man in a windbreaker stepped out. He was holding a clipboard and a flashlight. He did not look like a guest. He looked like problems. Who is that? Grant asked. I squinted at the screen. That is the code enforcement officer. I said, I met him when we were doing the electrical permits. His name is Officer Miller. Officer Miller walked right up the steps. He ignored the guests. He ignored the mood. He walked straight to the new electrical panel box on the side of the porch, the one I had paid $6,000 to upgrade. Marlene intercepted him. She put on her best hostess smile. She touched his arm. He did not smile back. He pointed at the panel. Then he pointed at the large tent set up on the lawn. The live stream audio was fuzzy, but I caught fragments of the conversation because Officer Miller had a booming voice. Commercial gathering in a residential zone. Unpermitted temporary structure. Exceed capacity. Marlene was shaking her head frantically. No. This is a private party, family. Officer Miller opened his clipboard. He pulled out a piece of paper. It looked like a printout of the advertisement Marlene had placed on the wedding venue website. You are advertising as a venue. Ma'am, Officer Miller said, loud enough for the first 3 rows of guests to hear. And you do not have a commercial occupancy permit. This tent is a fire hazard. You need to shut it down. Shut it down, Marlene screeched. We have a reveal. You have a violation. Miller said, You have 20 minutes to disperse the crowd, or I call the sheriff to clear the property. The feed cut. Brielle had stopped streaming. I sat back on the sofa, stunned. The silence in my living room was heavy. They did not just lose the vendors, Grant said quietly. They got red-tagged. The notification that she was running a business had obviously triggered a flagging in the county system. Marlene had tried to play both sides, telling the taxman it was a home, telling the bank it was a business, and telling the county nothing, and the lies had just collided in the driveway. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Brielle. I looked at the ID. I debated not answering. I debated letting her sit in the mess she had helped create. But I needed to hear it. I needed to know if she finally understood. I answered. "Hello, you bitch," Brielle sobbed. Her voice was thick with tears and hysteria. I could hear car doors slamming in the background. I could hear Marlene screaming at someone in the distance. "You did this," Brielle screamed. "You called the county. You called the vendors. You ruined it." "I did not call the county." "Brielle," I said calmly, "Mom did that when she listed the house as a commercial venue without getting a permit." "Stop lying," Brielle shrieked. "You are just jealous. You could not stand that I was going to be happy. You could not stand that Mom chose me. So you burned it down." I listened to her. I listened to the raw entitlement in her voice. There was no realization. There was no apology. There was just the anger of a child whose toy had been taken away. "Do you know how embarrassing this is?" Brielle cried. "Todd's parents are leaving. Aunt Linda is asking if we are broke. You humiliated us. You humiliated yourselves." I said, "You tried to throw a party with stolen money on a property you do not own." "Shut up," Brielle yelled. "Just shut up. Why couldn't you just let us have this? Why couldn't you just stay quiet for 1 week? Just 1 week." Colette. That is all we needed, and there it was. She did not want a sister. She wanted an accomplice. She wanted me to be the silent partner in her fraud. She wanted me to pay the bills and keep my mouth shut so she could play princess. "You asked me to be quiet," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Yes, just shut up and go away." "Okay," I said. I hung up. I looked at Grant. "She told me to go away," I said. Grant nodded. He looked furious, but he kept it contained. "Then let's grant her wish," he said. My phone pinged again. It was a text from Dana. "Update from the venue. Guests are leaving. The inspector posted a stop work order on the tent. Vendors are pulling their gear. Marlene is threatening to sue the county, the vendors, and you. But the important part is this. The bank appraiser was scheduled for tomorrow morning. He just canceled. He saw the police report. The valuation was dead. The loan was dead. Marlene was dead in the water. But I did not feel triumphant. I felt exhausted. It was a hollow victory. I had stopped the wedding. But I had also confirmed what I had always feared, that my family would rather see me as a villain than admit they were wrong. Then, Harrison spoke. I hadn't realized he had walked into the room until he placed a hand on the back of the sofa. He had been on the phone in the hallway. "The note is purchased," Harrison said. I looked up at him. "You own the debt." "As of 5 minutes ago," Harrison said. "Ironclad Capital was very happy to offload a distressed asset with pending litigation. They sold it to me for 80 cents on the dollar." "So you are her landlord now," Grant said. Harrison shook his head. "No, I am her executioner, or her savior. It depends on her next choice." He looked at me. "Colette," he said, "I know you are hurting. I know hearing your sister scream at you was not easy. It wasn't," I admitted. Harrison walked around the sofa and sat in the armchair. He looked like a general surveying a battlefield after the smoke had cleared. "People like your mother and sister. They live in a house of mirrors," Harrison said. "They only see what they want to see. They see themselves as victims, queens, as martyrs. They never look at the real reflection." He tapped his phone. "I have scheduled a meeting with Marlene for tomorrow morning," Harrison said. "She won't meet with you," I said. "She hates you. She thinks you are the reason this happened. She will meet with me," Harrison said, "because I just sent her a text message informing her that if she does not meet me, I will file the foreclosure paperwork by noon." He looked at me with those piercing gray eyes. "I am not taking you with me, Colette, and I am not taking Dana. Why I asked, because as long as you are in the room, she will perform." Harrison said, "She will play the mother. She will try to manipulate your guilt. She will scream at you to distract from the facts." He leaned back. "I am going alone. Because when it is just me and her, there is no audience. There is no performance. There is only math." "What are you going to do?" I asked. Harrison smiled. It was the terrifying, cold smile of a man who held all the aces. "I am going to hold up a mirror," he said. "And for the first time in her life, she's going to have to look at herself without you standing in front of her to hide the cracks." He stood up and checked his watch. "Get some sleep. Colette, tomorrow, We will finish it. I went to bed, but I did not sleep. I lay awake listening to the wind, thinking about Seabriar House. I thought about the paint I had scraped off the railings. I thought about the flowers I had planted. I had tried to buy a home with my labor. I had tried to buy love with my obedience. But Harrison was right. You cannot buy what is not for sale. And tomorrow, Marlene was going to learn that you also cannot sell what you do not own. The phone lay silent on the nightstand. Brielle did not call back. And for the first time, the silence did not feel like loneliness. It felt like freedom. The meeting took place in a neutral conference room at a mediation center in downtown, a place that smelled of stale carpet and compromise. It was a room designed for settling disputes between divorcing couples or business partners dissolving a failed venture. In our case, it was both. I arrived with Dana and Harrison. We were 5 minutes early. I wore a navy blazer and kept my hands clasped on the table to stop them from shaking. I was not afraid, but the adrenaline from the disastrous venue reveal was still humming in my veins like a live wire. When the door opened, Marlene walked in. She was accompanied by a man I assumed was Gerald Pike. He was shorter than Wade Mercer, wearing a suit that was slightly too shiny and a tie that was aggressively yellow. He carried himself with the swagger of a man who made his living finding loopholes in moral codes. But it was the third person who made my breath hitch. Brielle walked in behind them. She looked terrible. Her eyes were swollen, red-rimmed from crying. She was wearing sunglasses, which she did not take off. She slumped into the chair next to Marlene like a marionette whose strings had been cut. Marlene had not told us Brielle would be here. It was a calculated move. She had brought a hostage. Marlene did not look at me. She placed her handbag on the table with a sharp thud and turned her attention to the window. "Let us begin," Gerald Pike said, opening a thin file. He did not waste time with pleasantries. "We are here to resolve a misunderstanding regarding the usage of the Seabriar estate. My client, Mrs. Sinclair, is willing to be generous, despite the harassment she and her youngest daughter have endured over the last 48 hours. Dana opened her own binder. It was 3 inches thick. "We are not here for generosity. Mr. Pike, we are here for restitution." Pike waved a hand dismissively. "Look, we all know what happened." Tempers flared. A code enforcement officer was called maliciously, I might add, but the reality is, we have a wedding in 3 weeks. Mrs. Sinclair is prepared to offer a settlement to make this go away. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Mrs. Sinclair acknowledges that Colette contributed certain funds to the property maintenance. Pike said, she is willing to treat those funds as a personal loan. She will sign a promissory note to repay 50% of the renovation costs over a period of 5 years. Starting 12 months from now, I looked at the paper. It was insulting. 50%, 5 years, and a start date that was a year away. And in exchange, Dana asked, her voice cool. In exchange, Pike said, Colette signs a full release of liability, formally withdraws her claim to the September 14th date, and issues a public apology on social media for the disruption caused at the venue reveal. Marlene finally looked at me. It is a good deal. Colette, she said. Her voice was tight, controlled. It clears the air. You get your money back, most of it, when the estate is liquid. And Brielle gets her day. We can put this ugly chapter behind us and be a family again. I looked at Brielle. She was staring at the table, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. And when exactly does the estate become liquid? Harrison asked. He had been sitting so quietly in the corner that Pike seemed to have forgotten he was there. Harrison did not lean forward. He just sat there, a monolith of calm in a room full of nervous energy. That is an internal matter for the trust. Pike said quickly, It is a matter of solvency. Harrison corrected. And since you are asking my future daughter-in-law to accept a promissory note, the solvency of the borrower is relevant. Harrison turned to Dana. Show them. Dana flipped her binder open to the tab marked Fraudulent Conveyance. We are rejecting the offer, Dana said, and we are filing a formal complaint for fraud, theft by deception, and identity theft. Pike laughed. It was a dry, condescending sound. Fraud? Come on. Ms. Klein. This is a family dispute, a mother and daughter fighting over a party location. No district attorney is going to touch this. It stops being a family dispute when signatures are forged, Dana said. She pulled out a document and placed it in the center of the table. It was the vendor contract change form for the florist. This is a digital alteration request sent to Blooming Coast Designs, Dana said. It was sent from an IP address registered to Marlene Sinclair's home office. It requests a change of billing contact from Colette Sinclair to Brielle Sinclair, and here is the signature authorizing the change. Dana pointed to the scrawl at the bottom. That is Colette's name, Dana said, but Colette did not sign it. We have a sworn affidavit from a handwriting expert stating that this signature matches Marlene Sinclair's signature on the renovation loan documents. Marlene stiffened. I had power of attorney. She snapped. I have always handled Colette's paperwork. You had limited power of attorney for a specific medical situation 4 years ago, Dana corrected. That power of attorney expired. Using it now to commandeer a contract worth thousands of dollars is forgery. Pike interjected. My client acted in good faith to preserve the event. Colette had abandoned the planning. I abandoned nothing. I said, my voice was quiet. But it cut through the room. I was pushed out. And then I was erased. I looked at Brielle. Did you know? I asked her. Brielle looked up, startled. Know what? Did you know? Mom signed my name to steal the florist, I asked. Did you know she told the tent company I was mentally unstable so they would switch the account to you? Brielle looked at Marlene. Mom said. Mom said you transferred it. She said you agreed to let me have the account because you didn't want the hassle. Marlene's eyes flashed. I was protecting you. Brielle, you do not need to know how the sausage is made. You just need to walk down the aisle. Harrison leaned forward then. He placed his elbows on the table. And why is it so important that she walks down the aisle on that specific date? Harrison asked. Marlene narrowed her eyes. Because she is a bride. Because guests are invited. No, Harrison said. That is not why. He pulled a document from his own briefcase. It was the appraisal schedule from Ironclad Capital. You need her to walk down the aisle because you have a balloon payment of $250,000 due on October 1st. Harrison said. The room went silent. Brielle froze. What? Brielle whispered. Pike tried to grab the document. That is confidential financial information. It is public record when you default on a bridge loan, Harrison said calmly, blocking Pike's hand. He turned to Brielle. Your mother did not give you the venue because she loves you. Brielle, Harrison said, his voice gentle but unrelenting. She gave you the venue because she needs to prove to a hard money lender that the house can generate commercial revenue. He pointed to the appraisal form. See this? He asked. Commercial valuation strategy. The lender requires proof of a successful, high-capacity event before they will refinance the debt. If that wedding does not happen, or if it looks cheap, the refinance fails. And if the refinance fails, the bank takes the house on October 2nd. Brielle took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were wide with shock. Mom, she asked, is that true? Marlene refused to look at her. She stared at Harrison with pure hatred. You have no right to discuss my finances. Is it true? Brielle asked again, her voice rising. Is my wedding just a commercial? Marlene slammed her hand on the table. It is for the family, she shouted. Yes, yes. We need the valuation. Is that a crime? I am trying to save the house. Brielle, if we pull off this wedding, we get the loan, we keep the estate, and then we can lease it out, and we will be rich. I did this for us. So I am just a prop? Brielle asked. Her voice broke. I thought you wanted me to have my dream day. I thought you chose me because I was the good one. Marlene rolled her eyes. Oh, grow up. Brielle, everyone has a role to play. Colette was the wallet. You are the face. That is how the world works. Stop being so sentimental. The cruelty of it hung in the air like smoke. I watched Brielle's face crumble. For 26 years, she had believed she was the golden child. Now she realized she was just the shiny hood ornament on a car that was being driven off a cliff. Harrison sat back. Now that we have established the motive, he said, let us return to the settlement. He looked at Pike. We are not accepting 50%. We are not accepting 5 years. And we are certainly not accepting an apology. What do you want? Pike asked, loosening his tie. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Dana took over. We want an immediate injunction preventing any use of Colette's name or credit history. We want a confession of judgment regarding the $35,000 in stolen funds, and we want a formal statement sent to every vendor releasing them from the fraudulent contracts. If we do that, the wedding is canceled. Marlene hissed, the vendors will walk. That is not our problem, Dana said. Marlene stood up. She was trembling with rage. I will not do it, she said. I will not let you destroy me. She pointed a finger at me. You think you are winning, she spat. You are just a bitter, jealous little girl. You are trying to sabotage your sister because you cannot stand that she is beautiful and happy. I stood up too. I was taller than her. I hadn't realized that until now. I am not jealous. Mom, I said. I looked at Brielle, who was crying silently. I feel sorry for her. I said, at least I knew I was paying for your love. She thought she was getting it for free. Marlene's face twisted. Shut up, she screamed. She turned to Brielle. Stop crying, Marlene ordered. We are leaving. We are going to fight this. We will find new vendors. We will sue the county. We are not giving up the house. Brielle did not move. I said, get up, Marlene shouted. Enough. The words were soft, but they stopped Marlene cold. Brielle stood up slowly. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. I am not going with you, Brielle said. Marlene looked stunned. What, I am not going with you? Brielle repeated. You called me a face. You said I was just a role to play. Brielle looked at me. There was no love in her eyes, but there was a strange, jagged respect. You were right. Brielle said to me, she does not see us. She just sees mirrors. Brielle picked up her purse and walked out of the room. She did not look back. Marlene stood there, her mouth open. Her prop had just walked off the stage. She turned to Pike. Do something. Pike closed his file. Mrs. Sinclair, I think we are done here. Without the bride, there is no event to defend. Marlene looked at us. She looked at Harrison, at Dana, at me. She was cornered, stripped, and exposed, but she still had her pride. And that pride was a dangerous thing. You think this is over? She whispered. You think you can just walk away with my money and my house? I leaned across the table. It is not your house, Mom, I said. It belongs to the bank, and the money. That was never yours either. You will regret this. Marlene said, I will sue you. I will drag your name through the mud until you cannot get a job sweeping floors. Go ahead, I said. Dana handed Pike a document. This is a notice of pending litigation. Dana said, we are filing for the injunction this afternoon. Marlene laughed. It was a sound devoid of humor. File it, she said. I will see you in court. And I will make sure the judge knows exactly what kind of daughter sues her own mother. She stormed out of the room, her heels clicking like gunshots on the tile floor. Pike followed her, looking like a man who was already calculating how to drop a client. The door closed. I sat down. My legs felt weak. She is not stopping. I said, she is going to fight. Harrison nodded. He looked calm. Of course she is, he said. Narcissists do not surrender. They escalate. He looked at the calendar on his phone. The wedding is in 3 weeks, he said. The court date for the injunction will likely be set for the week of the 14th. He looked at me. She is going to try to push the wedding through anyway, he said. She is going to try to run out the clock. She will beg, borrow, and steal to get that tent back up. So the climax is going to happen on the wedding day, I asked. Harrison closed his briefcase. Not on the wedding day, he said. On your wedding day. He stood up. She thinks she is racing against the bank. Harrison said, she does not realize she is racing against the owner of the note. He smiled that cold smile again. Let her run, he said. She is just running toward the edge of a cliff I already built. I looked at the empty chair where Brielle had sat. I wondered where she was going. I wondered if she had anywhere to go. I stood up. "Let's go," I said. "I have a wedding to plan. And this time, I am going to make sure the venue actually belongs to someone who wants me there." The final week felt less like a wedding countdown and more like a hostage negotiation. Despite Brielle walking out of the mediation room, Marlene had somehow clawed her back. I did not know what threats she had used, whether she threatened suicide, bankruptcy, or total family excommunication, but by Tuesday, Brielle was back at Seabriar House. Social media told the story. Brielle posted manic, overly bright videos of herself directing florists and testing sound systems. She looked thin. Her smile did not reach her eyes. She was moving with the frantic energy of someone trying to outrun an avalanche. "Look at this," Grant said, tossing his phone onto the coffee table on Thursday night. It was a reel posted by Marlene. She was standing in front of the tent, the one the code enforcement officer had red-tagged, which was now fully erected again. "Nothing stops a Sinclair woman." Marlene captioned it, "Obstacles are just stepping stones. See you all Saturday." "She is defying the stop work order," I said, feeling a cold knot in my stomach. "She is betting that the county won't send a sheriff to shut down a wedding in progress." Grant said, "She is betting on social embarrassment being stronger than the law. She is wrong." I said, "The next morning, Friday, was the breaking point. We gathered in the chambers of Judge Holloway, no relation to Grant, for the emergency injunction hearing. Marlene was not there. She had sent Gerald Pike, who looked like he had not slept in a week. The hearing was short. It was brutal. Dana laid it out simply. "We are not asking to stop a wedding, Your Honor. We are asking to freeze assets derived from fraud. The booking contracts for the tent, the lighting, and the catering were secured using my client's identity and funds, then illegally transferred to a third party to support a commercial enterprise in a residential zone." Pike tried to argue. "This is a family dispute. The wedding is tomorrow. Irreparable harm." The judge cut him off. "Mr. Pike, I have a report here from the fire marshal stating that the occupancy permit for this event was denied 3 days ago. I have an affidavit from the bank stating the property is in pre-foreclosure, and I have evidence of forged signatures." The gavel came down with a sound like a gunshot. Injunction granted. The judge ruled. "All commercial vendors contracted under the disputed funds are hereby ordered to cease operations on the property immediately. The Sheriff's Department will enforce the order to prevent liability." It was 10 in the morning. The rehearsal was scheduled for noon. We drove to Seabriar House. I did not want to go. I wanted to hide. But Harrison insisted. "You need to be there, Colette," he said, "not to fight, but to be present when the truth lands. You need to see the monster shrink back into a human." When we pulled into the long driveway of Seabriar House, the scene was chaotic. There were trucks everywhere. Florists were unloading arches. The catering team was setting up tables. Aunt Linda's car was parked near the porch. She was early, as always, probably hoping to get the best gossip. Marlene was standing on the porch, directing traffic like a general. Brielle was near the gazebo, holding a dress bag, looking pale. And then, the sheriff's cruiser pulled in right behind us. 2 deputies stepped out. They did not draw weapons, but they walked with a purpose that made the air turn static. They walked straight to the lead tent vendor, a man named Marcus. They handed him a paper. I watched Marcus read it. I saw his face go pale. He looked at the deputies, then he looked at the massive white tent he had just spent 2 days erecting. He blew a whistle. It was a sharp, piercing sound. "Pack it up," Marcus shouted to his crew. "We are moving out." Marlene froze. She ran down the steps, her heels sinking into the grass. "What are you doing?" she screamed. "Marcus, we have a contract." Marcus shook his head, holding up the court order. "Not anymore. Mrs. Sinclair, the court says this site is an active crime scene regarding the funds. If I leave my gear here, it gets impounded." He turned to his crew. "Strike the tent." Now panic rippled through the property. The caterers saw the tent coming down and stopped unloading the ovens. The florist, seeing the police, started putting the hydrangeas back into the van. Brielle dropped the dress bag. She stood there, watching her dream dismantle itself in real time. Marlene spun around. She saw me standing by Harrison's car, her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You!" she shrieked. She ran toward me. She did not look like my mother. She looked like a wild animal. "Everyone! Look!" Marlene screamed, gesturing to the confused relatives who were gathering on the porch. "Look at what she is doing. She is ruining her sister's wedding. She called the police on her own family. She stopped 5 feet from me, breathing hard. Are you happy?" she spat. "Are you happy now, you jealous, petty little witch? You could not stand to see us shine. So you burned it all down." I stood my ground. I felt Grant's hand on my back, steady and warm. I did not burn it down. "Mom," I said calmly, "I just stopped paying for the fuel." Dana stepped forward. "Mrs. Sinclair, I advise you to step back. Any further communication must go through counsel." Marlene ignored her. She looked at Brielle, who was walking slowly toward us. Marlene shouted, Tell everyone what a monster she is." Brielle stopped. She looked at the tent crew pulling up the stakes. She looked at the caterer driving away. She looked at the sheriff's deputies posting a notice on the front gate. Then she looked at me. Harrison stepped forward then. He cleared his throat. "The show is over." "Marlene," Harrison said, "the bank has been notified of the injunction. The refinance is dead." Marlene turned on him. "This is your fault. You and your money. You think you can buy my family? I did not buy your family." Harrison said, "I bought your debt." He gestured to the house behind her. "As the holder of the note, I am informing you that you have violated the terms of the mortgage by attempting to run an unpermitted commercial enterprise. I am exercising my right to secure the property." He looked at the deputies. "Gentlemen, please ensure the property is vacated of all commercial equipment by 5 o'clock. Marlene staggered back. She looked like she had been punched. "But the wedding," she whispered. "The guests. They are flying in." Harrison turned to me. "Colette," he said. I looked at him. "The vendors are packed." Harrison said. "They are paid. They are ready." He pointed toward the north. "The vineyard is ready," he said. "The tent company Marcus works for. They have a second team already setting up at the Holloway estate. The caterer knows the address. The florist has been redirected." He looked at me with a kindness that broke my heart. "The date is still yours. Colette, September 14th, tomorrow." He paused. "You can have your wedding. You can have the flowers. You can have the lights. It is all waiting for you an hour from here." I stared at him. You moved the wedding, I saved the wedding," Harrison corrected. "But I did not do it for Brielle, and I did not do it for Marlene." He looked at Grant. "I did it for my son, and for the daughter I am proud to welcome." He turned back to me. "The venue is yours. Colette, if you want it, you just have to get in the car and drive away from this." I looked at the chaos around me. I looked at the house I had spent my savings to fix. It looked small now. Sad. It was just a pile of wood and stone that had been used to hurt me. Then I looked at Marlene. She was watching me, her eyes wide with fear. She realized that I held the only lifeline. If I invited the guests to the new venue, the embarrassment would be contained. If I left her here, she would be standing in a construction zone with nothing but lies. "Colette," Marlene whispered, "please, for the family." I looked at Brielle. Brielle was crying, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Marlene. "Mom," Brielle said. Her voice was shaking. Marlene snapped at her. "Not now." Brielle, "Colette, please, just tell them to set up here. Harrison will listen to you." "Mom," Brielle said louder. What Marlene shouted, spinning around. Brielle pointed at me. "You promised her the venue," Brielle said. Marlene froze. "You promised her the venue first," Brielle said, her voice gaining strength. "You took her money. You let her paint the gazebo. You let her fix the lights." Brielle stepped closer to our mother. "And then you took it away and gave it to me," Brielle said. "But you did not give it to me because you loved me more." She wiped her tears. "You gave it to me because I was easier to control. You gave it to me because you needed a puppet to sign the papers Colette wouldn't sign." Brielle looked at the empty spot where the tent used to be. You promised her the wedding, Brielle whispered, and then you used her to pay for the stage so you could sell tickets to my life. Marlene's face went white. Brielle, stop it. You are hysterical. No, Brielle said. I am awake. She turned to me. Go, Brielle said. I blinked. What, go? Brielle repeated. Go to the vineyard. Get married. But what about you, I asked. The guests? Brielle laughed. It was a broken, sad sound. There is no wedding. Colette. Todd left an hour ago. He said he didn't want to marry into a RICO case. She looked at Marlene. It is over. Mom, there is no valuation. There is no loan. There is just us. And I am tired of being us. Brielle reached into her purse. She pulled out her phone. She opened the family group chat, the one with all the aunts and cousins. Wedding update, Brielle said aloud as she typed. The wedding at Seabriar is canceled due to fraudulent management by Marlene Sinclair. Colette Sinclair will be hosting a celebration at the Holloway Vineyard. Everyone is welcome. I will be there as a guest. She hit send. Marlene screamed. No, you ungrateful little. She raised her hand to slap Brielle. I caught her wrist. I did not squeeze. I just held it. I looked into my mother's eyes and saw nothing but a bottomless, hungry void. Do not touch her, I said. I let go of her hand. I brushed a piece of dust off my blazer. I turned to Grant. Let's go, I said. We walked to the car. I did not look back at the house. I did not look back at the view. I heard Marlene screaming behind us, screaming about loyalty, about money, about how we would regret this. But as I slid into the passenger seat and Grant closed the door, the sound was cut off. It was just quiet. We drove out of the gate. As we turned onto the main road, I saw the caterer's van turning north, heading toward the vineyard. The next day, the 14th of September. I got married. It was not at the house I grew up in. It was in a vineyard with rolling hills and ancient oaks that didn't belong to me, but welcomed me anyway. The sun was golden. The air smelled of grapes and earth. Brielle was there. She wore a simple dress, not a bridesmaid gown. She stood in the back, quiet, drinking iced tea. She looked sad, but she looked real. Marlene was not there. Harrison told me later that she had locked herself in Seabriar House, refusing to leave even as the sheriff served the foreclosure notice. She was sitting in the dark, in the empty bridal suite, waiting for an audience that never came. As I stood under the trellis, holding Grant's hands, I looked out at the faces of the people who had driven an extra hour to be there. I saw Harrison smiling. I saw Dana raising a glass. I realized then that revenge isn't about burning the other person's house down. It is about building a house where they can't reach you. I looked at Grant and said, I do. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't paying for the privilege of being loved. I was getting it for free. Marlene had thought the venue was the prize. She thought the location was the reward she could dangle to make us dance. But what she never understood, what she could never understand, was the simple truth I finally claimed as I walked back down the aisle, a married woman, into a life that was finally mine. She thought she could give me a place to stand, but I realized I could choose my own ground. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal, justice, and finding your own path. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening while driving, cooking, or maybe taking a break at work? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed seeing Colette take back her power, please subscribe to Veronica Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people who need to hear that sometimes. Walking away is the biggest victory of all. See you in the next story.